Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. This time out, a very special guest joining us. Lou Marini. Blue Lou is here. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mitch.
Thanks for coming in.
Pleasure.
You're here doing sessions in Studio A here at Sweetwater Studios.
Yeah, sort of an in-house funk record or blues record or something.
But, some blues and some funky kind of stuff there. It sounded great.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was really fun listening to you play. It's always fun to watch someone who's so experienced to do sessions come in and play on tracks. Just kind of watching how you put that whole thing together is really, really interesting.
Well, thank you, man. But yeah, you're right. I've had a lot of experience. If I don't know by now, what should I do?
I think you're well established. I think you got it figured out.
Yeah. Well, there's always stuff to learn. That's the nice thing about music. You know, it's never ending.
Right. Right. Speaking of learning, you started. Well, actually, you grew up in Ohio, not far from here.
Yeah.
And your dad was a band teacher, right?
He was my high school band director, and then when I went to North Texas State University, they had a really fine jazz program there. He moved to Bowling Green State University in Ohio.
Okay.
And he taught saxophone and arranging and theory there.
Right.
And then he arranged, I think they said something like 180 arrangements for the college marching band, you know. So.
Wow.
Plus, then he retired to North Carolina and put a big band together, and I think he has almost 300 charts, or had almost 300 charts. I've inherited his book. It's amazing.
Wow.
He was a prolific cat.
Yeah, no doubt.
Daunting.
No doubt. As are you.
Well, I'm trying to be.
You know, Blues Brothers, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, James Taylor, Frank Zappa, Steely Dan, an incredible list of credits, both with people you've toured with and with the hundreds of albums that you've
Yeah,
played
well,
on.
you know, I never really realized I had a career until I was in my 40s. You know? I never thought of it that way. I still really don't think of it that way, you know. I was talking to Steve Gadd about that this summer. He says, we'll never grow up.
Yeah.
Well, that's the characteristic to me of the guys who are players. They remain infatuated with it, you know. And then as you grow older and you have a lot of experience to draw on, and you know, I'm still practicing, and it seems like your idea about your knowledge compared to what there is doesn't get bigger. It actually feels like it gets smaller, and because what there is seems to be so much bigger, you know.
Right. Right.
And I feel lucky because I'm part of a brotherhood or sisterhood too of fantastic people that every time I play with them, you know, you feel like the low man on the totem pole. There's so many great musicians that I've been fortunate to play with, and they teach you stuff all the time. James Taylor's band, you know, I mean, Steve Gadd, Larry Goldings, the keyboard player, is. I can remember sneaking on stage with my cell phone and putting it underneath the piano while Larry was just warming up, you know, for my dad, calling up my dad and say, check this out, and holding up, because he plays stuff that you just sort of can't believe.
Right. Right. What an amazing experience to get to be part of that ensemble and
Well, I've been
contribute
lucky.
your part as
I've been
well. I
lucky.
mean,
Like this summer, you know, I played with James Taylor, 40 concerts. We had, in between the two legs of that, we had like 7 or 8 days off, and I played with Michael McDonald during that break, which was a ball, and that was another experience that I always wanted to do. And then 3 days home in August and head out for 27 days in a row with the Blues Brothers, which, you know, James Taylor is, if you fly first class, you stay in the Ritz or the Four Seasons, you travel on these big, beautiful tour buses. The Blues Brothers is exactly opposite. You know, we're like the stuff that happens to us if there was cameras around, people wouldn't believe it. You know?
Right.
We're still like that. You know? So but I like it. You know, it's a whole different vibe. And then I'm playing in a beautiful band. Linda Carter, Wonder Woman, has a wonderful band in Nashville that I play with, and been working on my own stuff. I have a CD that was, in a few websites, chosen as one of the top 10 CDs last year, called Star Maker. And I'm working on a new CD now that is primarily vocal. I've been playing with this funny band, and my wife is Spanish, and we have an apartment in Madrid. So I spent a lot of time in Spain. And over the past 5 or 6 years, I've been playing with a Spanish blues quartet called Red House. And they're 2 young guys who play in famous Spanish bands.
Right.
A brilliant guitar player who is very well known in Spain, and then an American expatriate who's been in Spain for like 37 years as the lead singer. And so we're doing a bunch of my tunes. I'm singing with that band because I've been singing so much with them. This new CD that I'm working on, I'm singing all these tunes that I've accumulated of my own, you know.
Uh-huh.
So I'm excited about it. It's got a nice premise. It's a real production with backup singers and strings and synthesizers, but the blowing is like a Blue Note jazz record from the 60s. It's piano, bass, drums.
Nice.
And, you know, so whenever there's solos, it comes down to that older sound, you know.
Right.
It sounds pretty cool.
Right. So what is the different mindset when you're with a major tour, a James Taylor or Blues Brothers, or, you know, a major international tour? The mindset of being a sideman on a tour versus then being the leader in your own project and working on your own CD. How does your mindset change?
Well, you know, I'm used to being a leader in certain circumstances, from writing my own music and arranging my own music, and I have a terrific R&B band in New York called the Nuff Brothers. But yeah, it's a different mindset. And one thing is when you play live, you don't realize how much energy it takes to be the front man all the time. To be talking to the people. I've been doing some gigs in L.A. with a really put together an all-star Los Angeles band. Some of my friends that are ace musicians out there, and then a bunch of guys that I've met over the years. And I was surprised the first time I did it. About the second half of the gig, I started to feel it physically, you know. So it's another mindset. But it's like the Blues Brothers. You can't really prepare for how hard the Blues Brothers band plays. You just have to play the first 2 or 3 concerts because you can practice as hard as you want. It's not the same thing as the energy put out when there's an audience in front of you. You know?
Right.
And we're a hard-blowing band.
Yeah, absolutely. So how is that different than doing, you did Saturday Night Live for 10 years. You were part of the start of that whole phenomenon that went there. And working in that kind of a situation where you have a lot of different artists coming in and you're playing lots of different parts, how's that different?
Well, I always loved that. That's one of the reasons that I miss the recording scene. You know, the day-to-day thing of coming into the studio and not knowing what you're going to be up against. 1 minute you have to play like a Mozart flute, and then 2 sessions later you're supposed to sound like Dr. John tenor player, you know.
Right.
And to be able to instantly segue into the right appropriate sound and vibe for whatever genre it is. I was always proud of being a member of that cadre of musicians who could do that, you know. And, you know, do it like pretty much the first take, and then every take was better after that. Right. And it was so loose also. New York was, in those years, was fantastic. I was lucky because I caught the tail end of it from the 70s through the 80s. But the colleagues that I overlapped, guys like Romeo Penquay or Phil Bodner, musicians that played on those Miles Davis, Gil Evans records, for instance, you know, they told me that in the 50s and 60s, they were basically playing from 9 in the morning till 9 at night, playing live radio shows, going from session to session where there were 50, 60 musicians with all the greatest arrangers, you know, and everything done live. So that would have been terrific to have been a part of it. But I feel really blessed, and I don't take any of it for granted, you know, especially now that I'm getting on the tail end of it.
Yeah. So if a young musician wants to develop that facility to be able to just step into a situation and fit right in and get that first take, what should they be working on? How should they be orienting their thrust to what they're doing?
You know, the trouble with it is that it's akin to what I was talking about having the physical wherewithal to get on top of the Blues Brothers book, you know, to play that hard for an hour and a half or an hour, 45 minutes. You do it through experience. And it's harder and harder for guys to have experience ensemble playing. You know, as a jazz player, the guys that we loved growing up as kids, that we patterned ourselves after, were guys that worked 3 sets a night, 6 nights a week, 50 weeks a year.
Right.
And that's the way the music opens up. That's one reason why I think that after all these years, if anyone had told me that since 1978, when the Blues Brothers started. Granted, there was a 5 or 6 year hiatus after Belushi died, and we never thought we'd play together again. But if anyone had told me that since 1987 I'd still be playing with the Blues Brothers band, I would tell them they were totally out of their mind, because I never stayed on any gig that long. You know?
Right, right.
And but one reason is that we have a repertory that it's a big repertory, but we know all of it. And so when we play, we're on top of it, and we can play sort of looking down at it, you know. So much of the time when we're playing now, you have insufficient rehearsal time, and so it's always like you're trying to claw your way up there. You're using every bit of your knowledge and experience to make up for the fact that you don't know the music that well. Not like you'd like to, not the way you would do if even playing 6 nights a week. If you're lucky enough, like, to go to Japan and play the Blue Note, man, after about the 3rd night, some different stuff starts happening.
Sure.
Because the stuff that you're having to pay attention to, you don't have to pay attention to. Now you know the chart, you know the tune, you know what's going on, and so that frees you up to allow your creative part more license and more freedom, you know.
Right.
And that can only happen through repetition, through playing, but playing it live for people, because that's when your real concentration is happening. It's a curious thing, you know. I went from being a player who played. I started playing in the studios when I was in Dallas. I was lucky. I was like the youngest guy on the scene. And I was playing with Don Jacoby, the great old trumpet player. I had heard him do a clinic at the Stan Kenton Clinics, where I was a student. My roommate was Dave Sanborn. We've known each other since we're 15 years old, you know. And it's amazing how many of my contemporaries also went to those clinics in one place or another. But for a young kid to be able to have that experience under fire of playing in the recording studios, playing, you know, some guys think that you should only play jazz. I tend to think that anything I play, I'm supposed to learn something from it, you know. Whether it's, I've played a wide variety of gigs. I've never actually played the circus, but I've played the Lipizzaner Stallions, the ice shows, every possible kind of gig. There's a great story about a friend of mine in New York. Well, he's not, he's an acquaintance of mine. He's an older musician, but he was playing the circus, the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, and in the scene where he's the first trumpet player and where the elephants all stand on with their feet on the back of the preceding one, he was playing, and he hit a high note, and he said the last elephant, as soon as he hit the high note, he missed it, you know, really bracked it, you know. He said the elephant went like, and all the cats in the band were like, man, the elephant's giving you the ray, you know. And he couldn't believe it. And then the second show, he was thinking about it, and when he got to the part, he missed a note again, and the elephant, you know, turned right to him, and he told me he had to pass his story is that he had to pass the part on he freaked him out.
Couldn't take the scrutiny of the elephant anymore. Yeah, I could see where that'd be tough.
Yeah. So yeah, you need the experience of doing it day to day, and man, it's not so easy having the experience of doing it day to day.
It's not quite the same doing it in rehearsal.
No.
You kind of got to be on stage in front of people and see what works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, there's just an element of concentration that you have when you're live that try as you might, you can't. The same way with working physically. You know, you can practice hours and hours, but you don't have the, you know, it's not that it doesn't increase your endurance, it does, but it's the actual playing on stage where it gets you.
Right. One of the things I noticed as I was watching you in the session today, and I've seen this with some of the other top session players that we've had come in, it's very interesting to me that you'll do a take on something, and the next take is completely different, and the next take is completely different, and you're not just choosing an idea and then repeating and working on that. It's always something fresh and always a new idea. How did you develop that facility to always have so many ideas that you're throwing out there? Where does that come from?
Well, you know, that's one of those dichotomies. It's like you practice to get things under your fingers that you can incorporate in your playing, but as soon as you get them under your fingers, by the time they're there, you don't want to hear them anymore. You know, and so the sort of funny place that you're in is that you want to use these things, but you want them to emerge from your subconscious. And you don't want to have them emerge rote. You want to be able to use the parts of them that occur to you when, so how it bubbles up, that membrane between the very conscious studied learning
Right.
of repetition and doing things slowly until you can play it 10 times in a row at a certain tempo, increasing the tempo. And, it's a mechanical thing. But that is supposed to be sublimating. And when that emerges in the right way is when you're in tune with something else going on. And to me, that's always, I feel there was a mentor of mine, George Young, a great New York saxophone player, who was a virtuoso player. But George gave me some good advice one time. He says, you have to learn to fight for your first take. And, you want your playing to be informed by knowledge, but what you want to be happening is you want to be listening and have your solos be a reaction to what you're hearing. And there's a line in there somewhere that when you're on it, you don't make mistakes because you're actually sort of singing what it's that clear. But it's very easy to fall out of that or not to get into it all. It's a hard place to find. But the first solo, your first reaction is generally the purest take you're going to have on that. And then I remember one time doing the Japanese can be very pedantic sometimes, and I did a solo. This was back in the late 70s. And I must have played like 30 takes, and every take the guy would make a suggestion, like, well, Lou, that's nice, but could you maybe scream on the top note? And then, I like the scream, but after the scream, can you do, and you're playing, and you're just thinking like, and then all of a sudden, like 30 takes in, a take comes that has not the slightest thing to do with anything you've played before.
Right.
Nothing. It's like tabula rasa, and then that's the take. But it's nice that you said that about, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be in a fresh place. It's hard to do though, and a lot of times I think like sometimes on a simpler tune like this, I'm better off if I don't even look at the music, if I don't even think about what key I'm in, if I'm just totally reacting by ear to because if you actually trust your ear, Hugh McCracken, the great guitar player who died about a year ago, at his memorial service, there was an interview with him, and he said, I try to only play what I hear. And he was famous for not playing a lot, but what he played was great. So that was sort of akin to, I used to have a graffiti wall in my apartment, and Gil Evans one time wrote on it, "It's wonderful to be able to play what you hear, if what you hear is wonderful." It's sort of in that place.
Right.
It's, it's a mystery, really. It's just like I tell kids when I'm doing clinics, there's no way for us to track down how it is we actually communicate, how it is that we select the words we select, and that whatever's going on in there is unknown to us.
Right. Right.
It's a mystery.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I have an artist on your level who works with so many other artists on a similar level, I always have to ask, what is it that makes a great musician? What is it that makes them great?
Well, it doesn't hurt to have great technique, but there's guys who don't show their technique. Your technique it's like that same thing we were talking about. You practice and practice and to get something under your fingers, but then you don't want to be robotic, The great players, I think one characteristic is they all really listen, Some listen more than others. There are virtuoso guys who are difficult to play with in a section because they tend to be hearing themselves more than anybody else. I love ensemble playing. And I've gotten to play with great ensemble players, the greatest of which were probably Alan Rubin, my dear departed colleague, and Ronnie Cuber, the great baritone saxophone player, and Sound Nistico, the great Woody Herman tenor saxophone player. When you played ensemble with Sound Nistico, it felt like somebody feeling for you, you know.
Right.
It just was such a, and Ronnie Cuber's the same way. He's fantastic. And Alan was a very selfless lead trumpet player. He didn't try to impose, you know. His imposition was that he expected you to listen and play the way he played, you know, to tune into him. But man, his pitch and his sound were so wonderful that he was really easy to play with. Right. Super sarcastic, though, you know. I have a tendency to play sharp sometimes, and he would go, "Don't worry about it, Lou. We'll come to you."
That's great. That's great. Lou, thanks so much for coming in.
You're welcome.
We appreciate you being here. It's been a pleasure
It's
listening to
been
you.
a revelation. This place is fantastic.
Yeah, it's
mind blowing.
Not what most people expect when they come here, is it?
Certainly not. I had no idea what I was getting into.
So we hope you'll come back and
I'd
do
love
some more
to.
playing. We'd love to have you back here.
Love to.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thanks for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute.